Harry Potter, the boy who lived.
Hey there guys, Nordic Warrior here, welcome back to my video game review series. So those of you who have been following my channel will know that I've recently been reviewing every Harry Potter video game. In my last review we looked at the Deathly Hallows Part 1 from 2010. Today we're going to be looking at the sequel, and the final game in the mainline Harry Potter series, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2, released in 2011, developed by EA. So those of you who saw my review for the last game will know that in my personal opinion it's one of the worst games in the entire series. They basically took everything that worked about the series and threw it out. So going into this game there was a lot of work to do. So did this game end the series with a bang, or was it more of a disappointment? Let's talk about it. Just like the last game, the game is a third-person shooter based on the final Harry Potter movie. Once again, it follows the story of the movie pretty loosely. The game begins pretty much where the last game left off. After a long cutscene, which is basically a shot-for-shot remake of the intro of the movie, you start the game off at Gringotts, where you have to infiltrate the mines and find one of the Horcruxes. This introduces you to the game's overall combat as you fight your way through the mines and try to escape. Just like you did in the last game, you spend the majority of the game shooting waves of enemies. You have most of the same spells as the first game. One of the first things you'll notice about this game is that the combat has been significantly improved, and the spells this time all feel more powerful and more well balanced. In the previous game you would be relying on Stupefy for the vast majority of the game, because the rest of the spells pretty much sucked, and the spell wheel was a bit annoying too. Thankfully they removed the spell wheel, and instead replaced it with a much more simple mechanic. In this game you basically press a particular button or combination of buttons to select what spell you want. So yeah, the annoying spell wheel has been removed entirely, and this feature works a lot better. In addition to this, using one spell too much will lead to it becoming less accurate. This gives you an incentive to switch between spells to be more efficient in combat. The spells you have are of course Stupefy, the standard attack spell. You have Expulso, which is like a machine gun. You have Protego, which creates a shield to ward off enemy spells. You have Petrificus Totalis, which freezes enemies and in this game is basically like a sniper rifle. This is actually really fun to use as you can use it to pick off enemies from a distance and it's quite accurate, being considerably more effective from long range. You have Expelliarmus that in this game can be used to knock down enemy shields. You have Confringo that once again blows up and can knock down several enemies at once. You have Impedimenta that sends a bunch of homing missiles towards enemies. You can use this to target several enemies at once and take them out simultaneously. Again, this is really fun to use. This can be really useful for taking out enemies who are behind cover. Speaking of cover, just like in the first game, the game has a cover mechanic. Just like Gears of War and many other first-person shooters of its kind, there are many conveniently placed covers around the game that you can use. Enemies and allies will also use them, and the AI has been significantly improved from the last game. You can no longer run past enemies this time, and they actually do provide a bit more of a challenge here. Another thing they added is the ability to apparate, but this just moves you from cover to cover and isn't really that useful. So yeah, as limited as the combat of the game is, it's definitely a massive improvement over the last game. That's not to say that it's perfect though, it definitely isn't. There are certain sections of the game that get very repetitive, such as the level where you have to blast your way through Hogsmeade to make your way to Hogwarts, or that really annoying level in the Chamber of Secrets where you play as Hermione, and you basically have to escort Ron, who is useless in that level and spends the whole time moaning. You basically have to escort him through the chamber and fight off spiders while he opens the doors for you. Very boring. It's a tedious process and I wasn't a fan of it. One of the biggest changes from the last game is that instead of being able to only play as Harry, you can now play as several different characters, at various stages of the game. For a lot of the game you play as Harry. You can also play as Hermione, Ron, Seamus Finnegan, Neville Longbottom, Ginny Weasley, Molly Weasley, and Professor McGonagall. Unfortunately though, the differences between each playable character are purely cosmetic. The characters feel exactly the same, and all have the same spells. The only exception to this being that while playing as Professor McGonagall you can't run, you can only walk very slowly. And this is actually a hindrance, not a useful ability. So yeah, you can play as other characters, but it doesn't really add anything worth mentioning to gameplay. The game does have some level and location variety. As I mentioned before, you start the game off in Gringotts, and you have to escape. You also go to Hogsmeade and even take part in the Battle of Hogwarts, joining at various stages of the battle, at different parts of the castle. You also go to the Forbidden Forest at one point. The game has several boss battles. These are a lot better than the boss battles in the last game. For example, you take on the Carrows, Severus Snape, the werewolf Fenrir Greyback, Bellatrix Lestrange, and you take on Voldemort a couple of times. The boss battles are okay for the most part. The final battle against Voldemort is a bit of a letdown though. It was just a bit anticlimactic in my personal opinion. Kinda reminds me of the Voldemort boss battle in the Goblet of Fire, but I digress. Also, this game has a weird thing where, when you bring down a certain amount of a boss's health, they will scream at you. It's really weird. Seriously, what was that all about? There's also a level where you fight giants while playing as McGonagall. In addition to the improvements to combat and the variation, the game's story and voice acting is a little better than last time.
You have performed extraordinary magic with the Elder Wand, my lord. Tonight, when the boy comes, it will not fail you. It answers only to you.
It's not perfect, but it doesn't come across as rushed and as weird as in the previous game. And the cutscenes are a lot better this time.
This isn't over! Potter!
It helps that the game's graphics and presentation are absolutely beautiful. The game looks great for 2011 and it really looks even better than the last game. The backgrounds, textures and character models all look great. Now so far this game sounds alright, doesn't it? It made the necessary improvements on the last game, and it's a relatively competent third-person shooter. Well, unfortunately this game has a major problem. This game is short. I mean insultingly short. One of the shortest games I have ever played. Seriously, if you were speedrunning it, you could probably complete this game in about 2 hours. Which is absolutely unacceptable for a full-priced game. Even a movie license game. If the game was one of the greatest games ever, then maybe I could look past this. But it's really not that good. Not only that, but as I mentioned before, there are a few sections of the game that are really boring and really repetitive. And some of these sections have some padding, and really feel as if they were just there to make the game a bit longer. For example, there are areas of the game where one of your allies will have to open a door or a gate, and this will take them several minutes. You will have to defend them against waves and waves of enemies, and this exists only to pad out the game, which is still shockingly short even with all this padding. The game does have a few interesting features. For example, you can unlock a character viewer in the menu where you can view some of the game's character models in kind of a museum format. These all look great and I like features like this in games. You can also play and listen to the game's soundtrack in the menu. When you complete the game, you get an interesting post-credit scene where Harry looks into the Pensieve, and this gives you a compilation, kind of a tribute to all the games in the Harry Potter series. I actually really liked this, and it brought back memories of the older games in the series and made me want to play them again. It's just a shame that this game isn't as good by comparison. So that's pretty much all I have to say about the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I know this was a short review, but hey, this is a very short game, and if truth be told, despite all the fun I had with it, and despite what it does have to offer, it's just way too short and lacking in content for me to recommend over the other games in the series. I give the Deathly Hallows Part 2 a disappointing and perhaps a little bit generous 4 out of 10. A pretty disappointing end to the mainline Harry Potter series. Thanks for watching guys. I had a lot of fun replaying and reviewing the Harry Potter series. I will be returning to the series at some point, since there are other versions of these games out there. I also want to do a short video on the Xbox version of Chamber, because I said I would talk about it, and some of the differences between that and the PS2 version. Be sure to check out the rest of the Harry Potter reviews in the playlist if you want to. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned for more retrospective video game reviews. Thanks for watching and God bless.